After all this time, I'm finally reunited with her. My dear, darling, MILADY. What's up, fellas? Iridosiclides here, and in this installment of Breaking Elden Ring, we've got a weapon that I've been wanting to use again ever since the DLC dropped. The MILADY is one of the 3 light greatswords in Elden Ring, and it is by far and away the best one. I don't think anyone can disagree with that, but just in case you are the type of person who enjoys being a contrarian jackass in situations that don't require it, let me break down why the MILADY slaps as hard as it does. First and foremost, the light greatsword moveset is extremely fast and fluid and lends itself perfectly to multi-hit style builds that capitalize on the winged sword insignia talismans as well as Middleton's prosthesis. Not only that, but as you'll see later in the video, the MILADY can also be utilized in a guard counter build quite effectively due to the speed and surprising stance damage of its counter hits. But the main attraction when it comes to the MILADY is its signature Ash of War, Wing Stance. This Ash of War has absolutely bonkers damage and stance breaking potential if you can keep chaining your attacks together, which won't be too hard since the light attacks can be continuously strung together and followed up by a heavy variation in one swift motion. Not only that, but it uses such a small amount of FP that if you even get your mindset into the 20s, you'll be able to spam this until the cows come home. Now, there is only one glaring issue with the MILADY. It's found in the DLC, relegating it to either a late game or a new game plus option. So I did what FromSoft would do and reheated my nachos by heading into New Game Plus with a previous character. I took Mr. Colossal Corey for my Colossal Sword Only Run video, link in the description by the way, to R'Lana so I could respec into a dexterity heavy stat spread with more endurance in mind that I'll know what to do with. And just so we're clear, unless I state otherwise at some point, you can assume I'm rocking with this loadout and this talisman setup. Oh yeah, silly me, I forgot I had to respec a second time because I realized I didn't give myself enough faith to meet the Golden Vow requirement. Such is life in the lands between, especially when you're trying to break Elden Ring in New Game Plus. Before even thinking about Margit, I had the opportunity to see what the MILADY could do against a grafted Scion in the starting area. I normally hate fighting against these things, so this would be a very satisfying way to demonstrate just how ludicrous this weapon would be. Well, if it isn't Mr. Homeless Crackhead McGee himself. It's been a long while, hasn't it? Now, even though you just saw me absolutely blast the grafted Scion into smithereens a few seconds ago, I think Margit's upcoming misfortune is what perfectly encapsulates what this MILADY setup is all about. I open up with a few light attacks which already proc both multi-hit talismans, and then in the blink of an eye, Margit loses a massive chunk of HP from a Wing Stance Frost proc, which gave the Measles and Blanket combo a run for their money. Now after that, Margit gave me another opening to use the light attack Wing Stance, which was enough for a stagger and allowed me to finish off the fight without breaking a sweat. Next up on the chopping block was Gilbert Godfrey the Grafted. And if player scouting was a thing in the lanes between like it was in the NFL, 1, the New England Patriots would still find a way to cheat, and 2, Godric would know that at any point I'd be capable of an explosive play to turn the fight in my favor. However, he didn't do his homework, as I promptly executed the staple attack sequence of Wing Stance, chaining the light combo immediately into the heavy variant, and taking him right down to phase 2. With Godric frostbitten, the fight was pretty much over, except at this moment I discovered my controlling had fallen to the terminal disease known as stick drift, so the fight got prolonged a little longer than necessary. After Godric was sent to the depths of Elden Hell, there weren't any items I had to gather outside of the Academy Key and the 2 halves of the Dectus Medallion. Then I traveled up to Altus so I could trigger the Radahn Festival, as that was my next choice of boss battle. Normally I have a little hard time fighting against Star Scourge Radahn, but going into this fight, it wasn't a question of whether or not I'd beat him on my first try. It was how quickly I'd be able to. Granted, I'm at the point in New Game Plus cycles where you're basically over-leveled for every enemy that you're fighting, but 2,000 damage is 2,000 damage. One thing to remember is that unless you're on PC and can cheat engine the MILADY into your game early, or you rush into Mogwai Palace as soon as possible, this is what you should expect from a Star Scourge Radahn fight, all things being equal. The damage isn't unrealistic for the MILADY. This is peer-reviewed and citation-included factual evidence. I love ending fights with a heavy Wing Stance. It's probably one of the more satisfying feelings I've had in this game. Am I gonna beg for subscribers less than 5 minutes into the video? Nah, I'll save that for the end this time. The Red Wolf of Radagon is fucking dead. I wanted to change up my Ash of War against R'Nala, so I opted for Lion's Call to abuse her, and Moongrum's tendency to get pancaked. Moongrum put up a good fight, but just like everyone so far, he was no match for the MILADY. After getting humbled by Moongrum of all people, it was time to fight an actual enemy that didn't use bullshit tactics against me. While I realized the irony of this statement considering my past comments about R'Nala's fight, I also realized that I was once again proven right about how bullshit this fight can be. So I guess it makes it double ironic in a way. Or maybe the irony cancels itself out and you're left with whatever the opposite of irony is. Or maybe I'm just thinking about this too hard and that's also a possibility. Luckily, regardless of whatever doo-doo sting tactics your enemy uses against you, if you've got the MILADY, you can somersault your way to almost victory. It also helps when Renala just stands there and lets you pancake her into the floor. Lion's Claw had her out here looking like a Family Guy falling animation. Normally, after gaining access to the Altus Plateau, your average YouTuber posting an Elden Ring video is responsible enough to ensure they are recording the Draconic Tree Sentinel fight in the capital outskirts. However, much to my dismay, even though I've been making videos on this game for what, 3 years now at this point, every now and then I have a smooth brain moment and forget to click the magic recording button in OBS. But the good news is, you still get to witness me absolutely destroying Piss Godfrey, while simultaneously having one of the sloppiest fights in the entire run. My videos are like the box of chocolates metaphor from Forrest Gump, except in my case I might forget to upload the entire video one of these times. You never know. Before taking on Morgott, I thought it would be appropriate to show me dunking on the Black Knife Assassin for shits and giggles. Graceless Tarnished, Parsley Garnish, Zubat used Astonish, it don't matter. Flock of Turtles in 4, baby. When I say Flock of Turtles in 4, I meant I was in for a rude awakening in this fight.
Boo! You stink!
I don't know what the heck was happening to my brain, but based on the footage, I must have either been drunk, or this is old footage from my first playthrough of Elden Ring. Part of the charm of the Breaking Elden Ring series is that I don't even have to hold myself to a high standard of gameplay. Obviously, I would like to for the sake of my own ego, but I'd argue that getting carried by whatever I'm using helps me to prove my assertion that the weapon or spells I'm using are indeed as game-breaking as I say they are. Also, that may or may not have been a foreshadow into what I'm planning next for the Breaking Elden Ring series. One thing I haven't really touched on is just how much distance the R2 variant of Wing Stance allows you to cover. This shit is like piercing Fang on steroids, just look at this. Let's get an instant replay on that so you can all see what I'm really talking about here. Yeah, that's a pretty long distance. That's like half the arena. While the light into heavy stance combo is the real meta with this weapon, there's nothing stopping you from doing back-to-back R2s like I did to end off the fight. Another demigod slain by the MILADY at the first time of asking. When will I actually be challenged by all these maidenless challengers? Beating Morgott marks the point in the base game where you feel like you're close to being done, but then you remember the mountaintops of the giants exist. And in the mountaintops exist one of the bosses ever created. Commander Nile. The MILADY made easy work of the summons, and then Nile and I got down to business. He's one of those bosses that's easy to get into a groove with, but one wrong move and your ass cheeks are frostbitten, while the rest of your body is getting electrocuted. The cold infusion is probably something I should have taken off before the fight because Nile's resistances are very high, but because of some of the generous post-attack cooldowns that were there, I was able to crank up the DPS. Whenever I wasn't getting absolutely bamboozled, of course. My, have the frostbite tables turned. And when they did, that little voice inside of me known as my brain cells kicked in and was like, hey buddy, remember that Ash of War you were glazing at the start of the video? Now is probably the time to use it. A good thing I listened because that triggered a stance break that turned the tide of battle swiftly in my favor. And with Commander Nile successfully poked to death, I was able to get my hands on the first half of the Haligtree Medallion. The second half didn't require much work on my part, but the cleanup afterwards sure as hell did. Fighting the fire giant at this stage in Elden Ring's life cycle is a bit like trying to ignore all the virus-causing ads on a pirated show or movie stream. It's annoying and you don't want to keep doing this, but unfortunately it's a necessary evil. Thankfully, the MILADY makes fighting the fire giant much more bearable, even in New Game Plus. I tried mixing in some heavy wing stance attacks to see if I could get a stagger before the phase transition, but it just wasn't happening for me this time. So I settled for a normal phase transition, and was quickly surprised when I managed to get the stagger immediately upon striking the hand that I would never allow to feed me. What happened next was the usual 5 to 8 minutes of running around on horseback while dodging fireballs just to jump in and get little bits of damage here or there. But after a while, those little bits of damage added up to one gargantuan enemy being toppled by our darling MILADY. Of course, the events after the fire giant are par for the course for the Tarnished. You lose the one true female companion that you have had, and then you get banished to Bulgarian Hell. Before taking on the boss that makes this place Bulgarian Hell, I swapped out Wing Stance for the Stormblade Ash of War because I had honestly never used it before and I was curious to see how this would work. Which is crazy to think that it's been 3 years and I've never once used a weapon equipped with one of the most basic Ashes of War on it. Better late than never, I suppose. With the Godskin Noble successfully phase transitioned, and shortly afterward, well, dead, I turned my attention to this lanky bastard and started spamming Storm Blades like there was no tomorrow. In between Storm Blades, it seems as though I forgot where the dodge button was on my controller because I got pieced up. The Godskin duo is rightfully going to go down in gaming history as one of the most controversial and middle finger from game developer bosses ever created. However, as I am hopefully making you aware of by now, these two knuckleheads can easily be worked around with any sort of range strategy, much like 99% of the other bosses in this game. In the end, Stormblade's DPS and FP efficiency allow me to break enough wind to catapult myself to victory. Ya done! You know, it's funny that you should call me thou who approacheth destined death, Malekith, as if you aren't the one who's about to see it firsthand. Alright, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. The light grade swords are perfectly built for a fight like this one, against such a fluid and agile opponent in the Beast Clergyman. Be that as it may, I quickly realized I should have been spamming wing stance this whole time because holy damage. Of course, part of the fun for me in this fight was seeing how I could fit in the full light to heavy wing stance combo in these fights. However, against Malekith, the opportunities were a little bit harder to come by considering this guy is so light on his feet that he dodges attacks without even trying to most of the time. There's a natural elegance and grace about his moveset that makes him one of the more fun bosses to fight, and with the MILADY in my hands, I felt like I could finally match his fluidity. It also helps that at a moment's notice, wing stance can rip off chunks of anything's HP. And while wing stance normally does steal the show, this time it was a plain old charged heavy followed up by a regular combo that did the trick. And as for Gideon, I can't even really say I considered this to be a fight this time around. He would say he could have done better, but based on the evidence at hand, I highly doubt that. Ah, Godfrey. It seems like just yesterday I was stuck on your fight for an entire damn week. Now, your dumbass is about to get housed. Well, that's not the opening I envisioned, but I promise it gets better after this. A fun fact I learned early on in this bout against Godfrey is that the hitbox for his ground explosion apparently expands into the fucking sky because surely I thought I'd be able to wing stance over that. And then for the next couple minutes he just started stalling while I waited for an opportunity to get some funky fresh combos in. Because of Godfrey's somewhat aggressive nature, my attacks mainly consisted of R2s with some occasional pokes sprinkled in. Even though I could have just been spamming wing stance for pretty damage numbers, my goal at the end of the day is to still win the boss fights. Once he was in his 1.5 phase, I was finally able to get the wing stance tech I was looking for, but still took a little bit of knockback damage. I've seen other people straight up cheese him by doing this, but for some reason I couldn't make it work for me. After a couple quick more dabs and an actual successful wing stance dodge, it was time to fight Horaloo in all his half-naked glory. I successfully opened up with wing stance, but then I got yelled at, which of course has been known to be my downfall. And no, I'm not saying that because I used to be one of the kids that would start tearing up when my teachers would yell at somebody else in my classroom. You know, the plus side of getting grabbed by Horaloo is that the view up here is pretty sick. At this point, I was sick of fighting Horaloo and made a point to spam wing stance to victory or die trying. I was able to get a Rolana cameo boost and presumably some counter damage on the first blow. Then I followed with another couple heavy wing stances, did a couple rolls, and finished him off with another well-timed wing stance. Definitely not my best Godfrey fight, but in my opinion, at least in the last few seconds, I was able to demonstrate the power of the MILADY. While my spare runes on the ground are a clear indication that I died at least one time, my initial failure was a mere blip on the radar. If I had to show you one single fight from the whole run that perfectly encapsulates the MILADY's potential to break Elden Ring, it will be this one right here. Outside of the Iron Balls, this is probably the best weapon to use against Radagon. The power of wing stance brought him to his knees. I almost did this fight hitless, but unfortunately, after the riposte, I attacked just too slightly early and blew it. Nonetheless, I think that was a great way to make up for the subpar showing against Godfrey a few seconds ago. I was in two minds in the opening of Elden Beast. On one hand, I wanted to trigger the multi-hit buffs and get off a lot of damage, but on the flip side, I wanted to spam heavy wing stance and try to build up a stagger. In the end, I wound up doing a little bit of both and used wing stance variations to deal a ton of damage from the offset. I quickly realized that going for a stance break would have been the wrong move since I spent the next 3 business days dodging various projectiles and dealing with generally poor RNG. Next time I was able to get off a noticeable amount of damage, the Elden Beast decided to whip out his favorite party trick in Elden Stars. Life is all about a little bit of give and take, I guess. If Radagon was the perfect showing of the MILADY, the Elden Beast portion was completely antithetical to literally anything I could have possibly done with any weapon in this game. But sometimes that's how it goes against the Elden Beast. No matter how many times I come back to the game, one thing is for certain. Unless you have a pre-devised strategy that will completely script both phases of the fight, this dude is the most inconsistent boss fight in the entire game. Despite all of this, my dear MILADY was able to shine like the brightest star in the sky, even in the face of the fallen Elden star himself. Now with Radabeast defeated, it was time for me to clean up the last couple of base game bosses that I cared about, including in my videos before going into the DLC. First on the chopping block was Mohg. Formerly known as the Mohg Lester, now known as Mohg, the unfortunate omen who somehow wound up with an even worse fate than his brother Morgott. And by worse fate, I'm not referring to him being used as a pawn by Miquella in his plans to turn the lands between into some de facto Hope County from Far Cry 5. I'm talking about him being used by me as a punching bag to stat pad the Milady's kill counter. I wasn't able to one-cycle Mohg this time around, but I was able to put the Cold Infusion on the Milady to the task and got 2 procs in the fight, which for New Game Plus is not that bad. I'll take it. And of course, would it really be a Milady fight if I didn't finish him off with Wing Stance? With Mohg defeated, I gained entry into the DLC and settled at the first site of grace in the Gravesite Plain. However, I wouldn't spend much time here yet, as I still had other pressing matters to attend to. The first of which was heading down into the Halley Tree, closely followed by whooping Loretta's ass and her horse's ass in the process. With Horse Girl defeated, it was time to head into El Fail and get distracted by the view for a few seconds before psyching myself up to take on Millennia. In preparation for the fight, I wanted to change it up a little bit and tried to showcase the Milady's ability as a viable guard counter weapon, so I slapped the Deflecting Hardtear into my Physic, equipped Cragblade, and then changed up my Talisman loadout to include the Curved Sword Talisman, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Great Shield Talisman, and Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Heading into the fight, I was fairly confident I'd be able to handle Millennia relatively easily with my current setup. In my Colossal Sword only run I did a few months ago, I used this guard counter strategy to completely obliterate her. However, I was in for an unpleasant surprise. The fight started off as a mixed bag. I had to remember how exactly the Deflecting Hardtear worked, but once I got the feel for it again, I quickly remembered just how devastating it is for stance breaking. The damage from Milady wasn't as good as Guts' Greatsword in the Colossal Sword run, but only for having to hold down a button and press another button, I would take it. Eventually I was able to poke her down to phase 2, but then I ran into the major problem that plagued me in my early attempts. Because I wasn't dealing enough damage to her in her phase 1 with guard counters, the Deflecting Hardtear's effect expired. Which, if you know anything about how Deflecting Hardtear builds work at this point, you'll understand that I was indeed up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. I'll put it like this. I heard Millennia remind me of her name a lot in this run. After several failed guard counter attempts, I reluctantly went back to old reliable Wing Stance, but I forgot to switch my talismans, so I let Millennia get a free kill. I'm fine with that, because at the end of the day, she can kill me hundreds of times. All I need is one successful attempt. I faced her head on and powered up Wing Stance, launching myself at her with an anime-style aerial assault. Within an instant, she was frostbitten, and immediately after that I was reminded that I still have never learned how to dodge Waterfowl Dance up close. I would put this next sequence right up there with the Radagon fight for my favorite Milady performance of the run. Most weapons in this game are a one-trick pony that rely on spamming either a weapon skill or charged heavy attacks for success, whereas with Milady, this thing is an all-trick pony. Between light and heavy attacks and good old Wing Stance cheese, I was able to stance break the balls off of Millennia and didn't give her a chance to breathe before entering phase 2. I obviously couldn't hit her after her phase 2 opening since I don't have any ranged attacks, so I took the time to rebuff myself and cap off my HP. Since she was frostbitten, I really wanted to push as much DPS as possible and spam Wing Stance, but I was also afraid of her going for one of her hyper armor kicks and tricking me into falling for one of her insta-kill combos. After playing it safe for a few seconds, you'll never guess what she decided to reply with. My fears were almost realized after I came close to getting blendered, but luckily I was able to escape it last second. And with Millennia being the considerate person she is, she whipped out a Waterfowl Dance just to make me feel a little bit better about the predicament I was in. After nearly losing my life, I didn't want to lose the momentum I had after that phenomenal phase 1, so I spent the next minute or so playing very conservatively, only attacking when I 100% knew that I had an opening. Because I was able to reapply Frostbite, I felt a lot better heading into the final stretch. Step 1 was to not choke and die from Scarlet Aeonia, which I successfully dealt with. And then I said, you know what, fuck it. I got her frostbitten, I got a couple of heals left, so I'm just going to take the fight to her and show her who's the boss this time around. I was really hoping I'd be able to beat her using the Deflecting Hardtear strategy and show that off for you guys, and I think it's definitely feasible, but I guess I just wasn't being aggressive enough for it to work as intended, so that's on me. However, I think you still got a pretty solid look at the Milady's power against Millennia. Before I went into the DLC, I went and faced off against Placidusax because he's the optional remembrance boss that is not locked behind a boring questline or boring minigame. That's literally the main reason why I don't fight Astel, Fortisax, or the Regal Ancestor anymore. I just can't be bothered to do all that bullshit at this point. But if you guys want to see them in future videos, just let me know, and I'd be happy to include them if you really want to see them that bad. Early in the first and only Placidusax attempt, I was trying to land a couple back-to-back light heavy to wing wing stance combos, but he was pretty flighty. Luckily, I got good enough RNG afterwards that he went for his standing fire breath attack and just kind of stood there taking in the scenery, and I was able to get off a huge chunk of damage that wound up being the best chunk of the fight and frostbit him in the process. But alas, I did not get a stance break throughout all of that before phase 2. You guys know how phase 2 Placidosi works from here. I dealt with the big electric swoop, saw him disappearing and reappearing, occasionally getting good enough RNG that saw him stay put just long enough to get satisfactory amounts of damage, got frickin' laser beamed in the process, and ended off the fight with my trusty Ash of War wing stance. If at any point throughout the video you decided to take a shot every time I said wing stance, you would most definitely have some amount of blood in your alcohol stream by now. Since this run was being done in New Game Plus, I didn't have to gather any scatter tree fragments. I was already at Skydu level 14, I believe, so at that point I was basically already at the soft cap, so I just prepared my buff sequence for the Dancing Lion, as for some reason I always tried to fight him first whenever I go into the DLC. I felt like I'd be able to lean into wing stance an egregious amount just based off a hunch. When I saw how much damage I did, it was a good reminder that sometimes your first instinct is usually the correct one. As per usual in Dancing Lion's lightning phase, I spent the first 90% dodging around and was only able to get in a couple of hits. Ironically enough, I was able to get a frostbite proc for some huge damage in the ice phase. For some reason I thought he'd be immune during this phase, but then again I remembered that Commander Nile can be frostbitten, so I guess it would be within the realm of reason for this guy as well. Next was a fight I was really looking forward to doing all run. However, it quickly started to get a little out of control. Basically, I was getting my ass kicked. It did take me some time to get warmed up, but eventually I did in fact get my shit together. I thought it would be fitting to open up with wing stance because why not? And I spent the next little while getting in some charge heavy attacks as my main punish. You mean to tell me I got a stagger, and a frostbite proc, and a riposte? Oh my god, we're eating good today, son. The only disappointing thing about getting the stagger at that point was that I wouldn't be able to stun Rolana out of her phase transition attack. I didn't want to get cooked again by the fire variant, so I got some distance between us and dodged all of her magic projectiles. Well, almost all of them. After enough time passed, she felt it was the appropriate time to drop the lunar teabag onto me, but this is one of those attacks I'd be really disappointed to get hit by at this point in my life. I got the opportunity to get some more sizable damage off, and I eventually got a super clutch stagger from wing stance that allowed me to finish off the fight with a very easy riposte. This was definitely one of the more fun playstyles to use against Rolana. I really enjoyed the fluidity of the combat between us thanks to the MILADY. After Rolana, it was time to take on her disinterested male interest Mesmer. To spice things up a little bit, I added the Blood Affinity and equipped Cragblade. As it turns out, I probably should have spent less time splicing things up and more time worrying about, I don't know, dodging the telegraph nuclear bomb coming my way. Be that as it may, I felt like a bleed setup with Cragblade made sense in this fight. Mesmer is unrelenting, so you need attacks that come out quickly. The charge heavy attacks fit the bill, and they deal decent stance damage on top. So it was only a matter of time before I got a stance break and a nice little bleed proc right afterwards. It was a nice reward for my efforts thus far. With a few more charge heavy attacks, I got Mesmer down to phase 2. And I can happily say I was able to dodge the second painfully obvious nuke that he drops to open up the second phase. To cap that little victory off, I got another stance break as well. No bleed proc this time, but I didn't need it just yet. I don't know what the heck was going on while I was recording this fight, but luckily for me, my trusty MILADY had my back while I struggled to dodge his attacks that I consider simple to dodge. You know, for how good MILADY is, it's still not good enough to deal damage when it doesn't make contact with an enemy. I freaking love this fight, man. The frustrating thing for me about the DLC and Elden Ring as a whole is that for every amazing remembrance boss like Mesmer or Radagon, you have 5 other doo-doo major bosses that are either annoying as hell to fight or they're just a chore to get to or get through. In this case, I can safely say Mesmer is in my top 5 bosses in the entire game, and honestly, for most people in the community, I feel like a lot of them feel the same way as well. And with every victory against Mesmer is yet another realization that I forgot to eliminate Horn Scent. I'll see you in the endgame, buddy. After Mesmer, I decided to take on Commander Gaius. I think you know where this is going. Going from fighting Mesmer to fighting Gaius is kind of like going from eating a chocolate ice cream cake to eating cheesecake. I was really enjoying myself and having a great time, but now I'm not as satisfied, but I kind of see why people like it too. It's a conflicting feeling. I realize this comparison might not speak to that many people because I am just not a cheesecake person. But hey, if you are, I don't judge. I know there's some people who enjoy Commander Gaius as much as others enjoy eating savory cake. What's that? Sneak dissing cheesecake enjoyers? Why, I'd never. I forgot to mention earlier, but I switched back to the cold infusion wing stance setup, and it came up absolutely Moby huge for me right here. It always seems like the stance break and frostbite procs happen at the same time with this configuration. Commander Guise was finally at his HP threshold to trigger his phase transition, and while his spinning gravity thrust is a symbol of him gaining new abilities, it inadvertently serves as a metaphor for him spiraling down the drain in this one. In the end, Gaius and his frostbitten hog were put to rest by the sheer overwhelming power of our trusty MILADY. Why am I grabbing these even though I'm already at Scadu level 15 and thus at the soft cap? Simple. My gluttony knows no bounds. To prepare for my next victim, the Scattered Tree Avatar, it was a no-brainer to equip the Flame Spear and throw in the Fire Scorpion charm. After all, it's incredibly weak to fire damage, so this should be simple, right?
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Sometimes I feel bad about deforestation, and then I remember that the Scattered Tree Avatar exists. Normally, seeing damage output like this makes you feel good about yourself, but then you get in situations like this and wonder how you even beat Consort Radahn in the first place. In all honesty, the first phase of the fight might be the most difficult one for me to deal with, because once you get through that, it's just riposte, repeat, riposte, dodge telegraphed explosion, get free damage, wait for 3 telegraphed explosions and somehow don't die even though you definitely should have, get free damage again, and win. Next up on the list of doo-doo DLC bosses is the Putrescent Knight, and for this fella, I decided to add Stormblade to the MILADY again because I figured that it would just trivialize the fight. And when I used exactly one L2, I knew I made the right choice. You may be wondering why I didn't just decide to spam Sacred Blade like everyone else does. There's a few simple reasons. First, I didn't have it in my inventory and didn't feel like getting it. Second, I struggle with some of the timings in this fight still, so I didn't want to make it too easy for myself. Even though I did not use holy damage in this fight, due to Stormblade's increased power thanks to the Enraged Divine Beast Talisman, I did not have to think about which attack to use next. The answer was simple. I either pressed L2, or I waited for an opportunity to use L2. Ignore the small amount of health I had, and just enjoy the fact that there is yet another way to cheese the hell out of this boss. With Putrescent Knight out of the way, I took a deep breath, let out an exasperated sigh, and did count Ymir's questline so I could gain access to Matir's boss fight. Not only does Matir not have an intro cutscene despite being arguably the most important additional piece of lore added into the DLC whose presence warps how most of the base game story elements should be perceived, her boss fight is completely and utterly bullshit. Like most other interactions with enemies in this game, I figured I would be able to wing stance my way through this and not have to put much thought into it. Instead, I felt like it would be an appropriate time to keep a healthy distance between us, just so things wouldn't get weird, you know what I mean?
It got weird, didn't it?
Yeah.
So instead of being knee-deep in Matir's fingussy on her chest, and that most definitely has an unpleasant aroma in close proximity, I just Stormbladed away from a safe distance. I still got hit by her phase transition, but who doesn't? Same with this thing. I still literally have no idea how you're supposed to dodge this thing. I really don't. Getting a stagger with that little health left is quite the insult to injury, but then again, nobody should feel insulted by getting eliminated at the hand of the MILADY. I wanted to fight Bale next, and the first step on that journey to his arena is to offer your body as a sacrifice to this deep gaping hole, which funnily enough is what they used to call me in prison. Prior to gaining entry to the Jagged Peak, you must first choke against Ancient Dragon Man before redeeming yourself and regaining your honor. If there's one thing I've learned in all my hours spent fighting Bale, it's that under no circumstances will I ever go into this without Egon by my side. Could you consider it cheap that Egon can take Bale's aggro at any time? Perhaps. However, there's a vital piece of information you could consider before taking issue with that. According to my calculations, we are around 30-something minutes into a video in which I am breaking Elden Ring with one of the most overpowered weapons in this game. So if you're more offended by the mere presence of Egon than the fact that I just took off almost 10,000 HP from Bale and frostbit him in the process in New Game Plus, I do believe that your priorities may need to be reshuffled a little bit. Oh yeah, sure, just phase through the entire arena. That is completely normal. Egon was taking most of the load in the fight this time around.
What?
So while Bale was getting distracted, I could get around to his tail and wail away with light wing stance combos. I may have overstayed my welcome back there a little bit, but in the end, Egon actually did an obscene amount of damage with his Dragon Claw incantation that I did not know he was capable of doing. Sure, I got the final hit in, but Egon was definitely the real closer in this fight. Yo, Egon, fight's over, buddy. You can stop now. Okay, I just think I'll leave you alone to process this. While Egon's Phantom Claw was stuck in a perpetual feedback loop, I made my way through the Darklit Catacombs, possibly forgot to fucking record the jury fight again, and was face to face with Mini Midra. Midra, you poor thing. You have no idea what is about to happen to you. Every setup I've used so far would have worked fine here, but the OG Cold Milady did the trick yet again. It didn't take long to see why this was the right choice for Midra. The tried and true light into heavy wing stance combo resulted in the devastating frostbite into stagger wombo combo that's been the staple of the run so far. Wanting to get the jump on Midra's phase transition, I ran all the way to the other side of the arena before he got up from being riposted, and upon further review, that was a mistake. Even though I have Midra's moveset down to a T and the fight started off great, this was not a walk in the park by any means. You see, for every one of Midra's combos such as this 5-piece that I have the ability to dodge with my eyes closed at this point, there are other attacks that act as the yin to my yang, such as the Piss Missile. And yes, Madness is not an attack per se, but if you manage to get hit by it, it does sting a little bit. There were times looking back at this gameplay that I was just sitting here shaking my head at my past self. I'm sitting here using a game breaker of a weapon and I'm playing like an idiot. But if there's one thing my past self did remember, it's that I was using a weapon so busted that scholars 1,000 years from now will be ranking Milady in the upper echelon of the most destructive weapons ever created by humanity. That is, of course, if we don't destroy the planet and destroy ourselves by then, but we'll worry about that when we get there, I guess. With every optional DLC Remembrance boss defeated, it was time to head into Iniri Lim and face off against the most fearsome enemies in the game. The first step was to get through Ramana, Saint of the Bud. For you folks that may be new to the channel seeing this video, here's some backstory into my relationship with Ramana. I hate this bitch. Case closed. Since my introduction to the Dark Souls, Blood, Sekiro, Born Ring franchise through Elden Ring a few years ago, I have gained some knowledge about FromSoft previous titles and the crappy bosses that have been created throughout that time. One thing I can say for 100% certainty, having never played any other games besides Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3, if you have ever played through Dark Souls 2 in its entirety and all the DLCs, and you enjoy the Ramana fight, I think you might have been huffing paint thinner in your free time outside of playing video games. Like dude, just look at this shit. Did I dodge most of the attacks from this combo? Yeah, sure, but could I do it again consistently? Absolutely not. The fight alternated between times of big damage for me and times of running around, dodging attacks, and dealing with Ramana's stalling. I understand that lore-wise, it was her duty to protect the Church of the Bud and all that jazz, but if it was really that important, surely she would have gotten a cutscene. I mean, I could rant all day about how FromSoft dropped the ball with the DLC bosses in that regard, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to whoop some ass and find shit to occupy our time until Elden Ring Night Rain comes out. Regardless of how I feel about missing this jump attack right here, even though I, generally speaking, dislike this fight, I had a fun time using the Milady this time around. Adding a little bit of athleticism into my playstyle with wing stance allowed me to match Ramana's freak in the aerial attack department, which I think helped me out a lot in the end. After beating Ramana, I committed arson for the 1000th time playing this game, and I traveled through the absolute monstrosity that is Iniri Lim, so I could be face to face with the best, worst plot twist boss fight that has ever been conceived by storyboard writers. I switched back to the Stormblade setup for the fight against Letta and friends because the Ash of War is just busted against NPC enemies. Honestly, there's not much to say about this boss fight. Sitting back from a distance and spamming Stormblade carried me through this fight. This is the one fight in this run where I can say it had less to do with the Milady and more to do with how OP a certain Ash of War is. Any weapon would have done the same thing in this fight. Now, we finally arrived at the ultimate test for the Milady. This is the boss fight that will either cement its place in Elden Ring folklore as a game-breaking weapon, or as just another run-of-the-mill weapon that will be forgotten with time. As soon as I stepped into the arena, I realized that wing stance wouldn't be as useful to me as it has been. The animation lasted barely more than a couple frames too long. Looks like charged attacks it is then. And see, I didn't mind that because the charged heavy attacks are still building up reasonable levels of frostbite, and I was able to proc Radahn at about a quarter health. I tried to sneak in a couple heavy wing stance attacks, which had mixed levels of success. I wanted to see how it would work in his second phase, but unfortunately, I would have to wait for that opportunity to come. I was in a little bit of an experimental phase. I wanted to test out each setup I had success with so far so I could see which one would be the most viable in this fight. So I tried the cold infused Cragblade and got about the same damage results except I didn't stagger him at all. Maybe in the hands of someone more skilled than me, this would have been successful. In the end, I'm happy to say that the tried and true method of Cragblade is what led me to victory. The slow and methodical approach of this fight lends itself very well to an Ash of War where you can kind of just set it and forget it and not worry about looking for opportunities to spam it. Even though I was successful just using Cragblade and the base Milady moveset, I really still think Stormblade would have been great to use in this fight as well. Spamming L2 with Stormblade is fun for sure, but there's nothing more satisfying than staggering the balls off of bosses and getting a Frostbite proc at the same time. Radahn's Golden Shower attack to open phase 2 was the perfect time to rebuff Milady with her Rocky Outcropping, and after that, it was simply time to get good. Consort Radahn is what I like to call an equalizer of a boss fight. At this point, it doesn't matter what build you have or what OP spells or weapons you think you have. None of that shit matters once you step through that fog wall. Here, there is no magical one button pushing you win type of shit going on. You know, I might have just repeated the same 4 sentences in a row with slight variations, but look, man, it's getting close to the end of the script, and my creativity is starting to bloom into anxiety about getting this damn video out. There were no staggers in Phase 2 just yet, but I managed to get off another Frostbite proc, so things were looking pretty good. If I snuck in a charge heavy attack here or there, I more than likely could have gotten a stagger at some point, but I didn't want to lose my momentum, so I was playing very safe and just went for tap R2s instead. Once Consort Radahn's health bar gets level with the characters in his name tag, my palms start to get a little sweaty, if you know what I mean. After successfully not getting obliterated by his shooting star impression, and dealing with about 20 seconds worth of stalling on his end, I continued to chip away more and more at his health bar. Once his health was even with his full government first name, my Cragblade buff ran out, meaning it was time for me and the Milady in her purest form to finish what we started together. After one final somersault from Consort Radahn, I finally gained the courage to charge up one final heavy attack to seal the deal, thus ending the run and certifying the Milady as one of Elden Ring's truly game-breaking weapons. I think it goes without saying that if the Milady was a professional athlete, it would certainly be a first ballot Hall of Famer with no questions asked. Before I get out of here, there's a couple favors I need to ask from you guys. If you're new around here and you like what you saw from me today, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future uploads as we head into a new era of my YouTube channel. I love Elden Ring with all my heart and soul, but it's time for me to incorporate other types of games and other types of videos onto the channel. So if you have any ideas for any things you want to see from me in the future, whether it's a game-breaking weapon run, or another type of challenge run, drop a comment below so I can take you up on your offer. That's all for me for today. I've been Flock of Turtles, you've been amazing, and I'll see you all in the next one.